trying to cut through what's going on at Chelsea is quite difficult because it doesn't really have a precedence. There's nothing to compare it to. So, and anyone that says they know what's going to happen, they just don't. They really don't. You've only got to look at, I think, the Chelsea, the temporary Chelsea board or temporary Chelsea custodians asking for clarity. The Sky Sports News wheel these experts out, and they really don't know because this has never really happened before. But as far as I can see, so you just sort of got to try and cut through it and think, where does it impact West Ham? As far as I can see, there are a number of issues. Number one is Declan Rice and the fact that Chelsea have obviously coveted Declan Rice since, ironically, they released him. We'll get into that in just a second. The second part is actually how it would impact Chelsea's standing in the Premier League, considering, ideally, we would have aspirations to finish in the European places. Basically, are they going to be punished, or is the crisis going to have a detrimental impact on the squad that would in turn result in a loss of form? The other way that I think there might be an impact is we still owe Chelsea money. And we owe Chelsea money for Kurt Zouma. We didn't pay all the £25 million up front. And at the moment, Chelsea aren't able to receive any money, I think, from almost anything, be it a shirt sale, be it player transfers. And just because the deal has been done doesn't mean that they can then accept the next instalment. That's really all there is to say about that particular one. But I just when I was thinking through it, I think, hold on, that's quite an interesting little aspect to it. On the Declan Rice one, and this is really where it gets interesting, I think, for West Ham, and gets interesting for Declan Rice. We all know that Declan Rice's family are Chelsea fans, and we all know that he was released by their academy, and his best mate is Mason Mount. It's people put two and two together, and I don't think necessarily they come up with anything other than four, which is, if you take Declan's comments that he would one day like to play Champions League football, you take into account where he lives, his historical association with Chelsea, the fact his best mate's there. As I understand it, some of his family members are season ticket holders. It doesn't take much to extrapolate that further. I think, well, Declan might want to play for Chelsea one day. And I think that was probably the accepted version of events if, as we suspect, West Ham can't match his ambitions and he wants to go on and play Champions League football, then that would be his destination of choice. The trouble is they can't buy him now. There's no doubt about it. And all of this is based upon what we believe is going to happen. Unless you think there's going to be a very, very quick resolution to this, then it can't happen. I mean, they're actually banned from doing so. Even if you think, well, hold on a second, maybe the club will get sold quickly. Well, I don't think that will happen either. I'll explain why in just a second. Who's to say that the new person that comes in is going to want to come in and say, here you go, oh, by the way, I'm going to not only spend billions on the club, but I'm going to lavish loads of extra money on it as well. And by the way, you can have Declan Rice. I think it's a stretch too far. I believe at the moment that there'll be a lot of players at Chelsea will be contacting their agents and saying, get me out of here. Let's have a look at this legally. Let's have a look at what's happened in Russia, where they've looked at the legalities of it, and they've suggested that there's loopholes, there's ways out of the contract. Basically, some of Chelsea's players will be thinking, how can we get out of this? I don't want to be around in this situation. If players are looking to leave, it's rats deserting a sinking ship, by the way. And I don't think all of them will do it, but we know that there's a certain mercenary element in football. There'll be a lot trying to do that. They're going to be suffering quite a lot of losses, and realistically, it's easy to view football clubs as being this omnipotent entity who make up the rules and the normal rules don't apply to them. Well, they will apply to them, and that will be if the court rules that actually the contract is not binding anymore because Chelsea aren't. Well, in essence, Chelsea have now ceased to be a trading company. Then you may well find that that players do leave. It's going to leave Chelsea in a very, very bad position. So I don't think, firstly, they can afford Declan Rice there. What's it mean for Declan Rice? It's interesting. I think as we understand it, Man City don't want to buy him. Not that they don't want him, but I think it looks like they're going to try and pour all their money into getting Haaland. That's the suggestion. Or maybe go back for Harry Kane. Even Man City can't escape the financial fair play regulations. So I think, as we saw with Jack Grealish in the summer, they'd have liked Jack Grealish, and they've got the money to spend 140 million on Harry Kane. They just weren't allowed to do it. So let's say Man City can spend a net 100-odd million. It ain't going to be on Declan Rice because they're going to try and want to plough everything into Haaland. Man United, well, I don't think there's any... It's hard to make a case that Man United are ready to match Declan's ambitions at the moment. Liverpool, probably not. They don't spend that sort of money. I just think the options for Declan are dwindling, and I do believe that maybe it might be in everyone's best interest, Declan and the club, to actually sign a new deal, probably put a buyout clause in there with him thinking and actually saying, look, I'm going to give you another year, otherwise I'm going to try and exercise that buyout clause, because all the while that Declan is stalling and not signing the contract, he's actually losing money. And I don't think he's particularly money motivated, but I do think that's part of it here, and I think that might be best for all concerned. I wouldn't be surprised to see that happen at all. Before I go any further, this video is sponsored by the OneFootball app. You can read lots. By the way, I'm pointing down there because that's where the link is. The link is, you can click that link underneath this screen in the description, or use that QR code up there. You can download the OneFootball app. It's full of stories about West Ham. It searches the internet, searches newspapers, finds all the West Ham related stories, puts them all into one place. All you've got to do is when you sign up, say, I support West Ham, puts all that news together for you. Best of all, it's free. The other aspect of it is obviously what's going to happen with Chelsea and the club as a whole, and how all that impacts them in terms of their league standing. Well, I think so far they've done a tremendous job, but uncertainty is gonna creep in. When I say they've done a tremendous job, I mean Thomas Tuchel and the players. They're not going. There's going to be disharmony. If you think that there's anything other than that on the conversation when they sit round at the club canteen, then you'd be much mistaken. Nobody knows what's going on, and that's going to go right from the manager to probably the person serving the food and cooking the food in the staff canteen. They do not know what's going to happen. There's been talk of a 17-day winding up order. They can't, not winding up order, but they might not be able to trade after 17 days. I find the fact that they're only being given £20,000 for travel expenses per away game is really interesting. Now, apparently their hotels have been paid for the travel, but they're not going to be able to travel in the certainly in the luxury which they're accustomed to. Is all of that and the uncertainty going to have an impact on the pitch? It would have to. It would absolutely have to. And then you get to the question of points deductions. Are they going to get deducted points for falling into this mess? Well, is there a precedent set for having a company seized by the government in times like this? No, there's no precedence, but there is one for going into administration, which is really a limitation on your trading. Basically, an administrator is running you, and that is a fine and a points deduction. And realistically, it doesn't. You don't have to make. I don't think you have to stretch it that much to suggest that they are at the moment in a form of administration. They have been, the running of the club has been taken over by the government. And they've been put into a straitjacket, a financial straitjacket, where they can't trade properly. Now, when I mentioned earlier on about Kurt Zouma, our point is we probably owe Chelsea money. Whatever, possibly the next instalment might be 5 million. I'm making that up, but let's just suggest it is. Let's say it was 25 million paid over 5 years. That's normally the way it's done. 5 million a year. We can't pay the next instalment for Zouma. Now, I think West Ham have got to be quite sensible on this. I don't think we think, hey, party time, let's go and have a good old spender. I think, you put it away, and imagine that at some point you will have to pay that back. Same for the money for Vlasic. However, and that's where it impacts West Ham there. However, the real interesting one is Chelsea will have bought players, and Chelsea will owe money to clubs. So Chelsea will owe some money to Inter Milan for Romelu Lukaku and every other player they've bought. Chelsea aren't going to be able to pay that money. They're not allowed to. They're not allowed to pay any money out of the bank. They've possibly got some money in the bank. Now, we know Roman Abramovich was bankrolling them. They made a loss each season, and he would subsidise that. However, they're not allowed to pay any money. So let's say the next instalment for Romelu Lukaku is this month. They ain't getting it. Inter Milan are not getting their money. Anybody else who Chelsea owe money to are not getting their money. Well, immediately that doesn't happen. Of course, these clubs are going to raise the issue. If it's domestically, they're going to raise it with the FA. They're going to raise it UEFA, FIFA, whoever. That, in turn, they're not going to be overly understanding on it. They're going to receive the punishments that you would receive for not doing that sort of thing. I think Chelsea are in a massive mess at the moment. And this suggestion that actually the government would allow a quick sale as long as Roman Abramovich doesn't take any money from it. Why would Roman do that? Why would he do that? He was quite clear in his messaging when he said he doesn't expect the loans to be paid back. He's not going to. What he was saying is, I'm not going to bankrupt the club and liquidate the club in order to get my money back. That's what he was saying. He also said that he would any net money he would give to Ukraine. That's what he said. But the wording was quite clear. He said net money. If he was going to be totally benevolent, if he was going to have absolute generosity, then he would have said, look, I'm going to sell the club, or whatever. I'm going to give it to the fans. I'm going to give all the fans. But the fact he wants to sell it, and then he's talking about net money, means actually once I've taken what I deem that I'm owed, which is possibly £2-3 billion or something like that, then any net profit. Well, let's say he sells the club for $3 billion. He feels he's owed £2. Well, that's what he's saying. Any net is going to go. We'll go to the Ukraine or whatever. But the fact he's talking in those terms means he's not going to give that club away for free. And that's what the UK government are saying. It's not the UK government that's saying he should sell it. There's no desire from either the UK government or Roman Abramovich to sell this club. It's literally the desperation of the Chelsea fans. And I understand this, by the way, thinking how can we get out of this mess? And it's a story for Sky Sports or Talk Sport or whatever. Because for him to make no money out of it, means he's going to give the club to somebody else for free. It means if there's an interested party, actually all the money from it is owed to Roman Abramovich. The debt is to Roman Abramovich. The UK government are not going, no way they're going to let him call in his debt because the UK government have frozen any money in or out. There's no financial transaction can happen. He's not going to let some other billionaire get what he's done for free. No, what he's probably going to do is actually probably more advantageous at this point to hope that this whole thing blows over and actually eventually he's allowed to own Chelsea again and all the oligarchs who've had their assets frozen suddenly are allowed to trade again. But I say the word suddenly, nothing will be sudden about this at all. And I think there's people looking at it thinking, oh, this can get resolved in 2 or 3 weeks. Well, then I don't want to get into the war aspect of it, of what's going on in Ukraine or whatever, but for that to happen, you have to think that all that conflict would be over in the next 2 or 3 weeks. There would be a massive climb down politically from the person that we believe is running it, and that there would be some sort of accord between the West and Russia that would suddenly make everything hunky-dory and everybody around the world to say, do you know what, let's let the oligarchs continue. That this is all going to happen in a matter of 2 or 3 weeks. This thing could roll on for years. And realistically, you may well find that Chelsea are just run on a shoestring budget until then. I mean, for a lot of clubs, there's probably clubs in League One or whatever thinking, well, hold on, we can do away games for 20 grand a pop. And I'm sure they can. Well, Chelsea can't. But it may well be that Chelsea actually, because they don't have any money being put in, they actually have to do a fire sale, sell off a load of players, and find their level. I mean, it's really, really interesting looking at it. It's sort of like if you got your house repossessed, for instance, and your house was worth 400 grand. When your house is repossessed, once it's repossessed, they're not looking to go and find, let's go and get market value or sell it off for 400 grand. They won't. They'll just go and sell it off whatever they can get for. It's the same with administrator. Administrator goes into somewhere. He's not going to go into there and think, look, Romelu Lukaku is worth 100 million. I'm going to reject all bids of anything that's not 100 million. They just won't do it. They're just there to bring in money. And basically the vultures will be circling, saying, actually, we'll have him. 60 million Lukaku, yep, fine, we'll take that bid. Kai Havertz, 30 million, there you go, we'll take that, thank you very much. That's just, I can really, really see this happening. And I think the other thing that will happen is, if it doesn't get resolved, is, look, what's not stopped is encouraged. And I think for a long time, dodgy ownership has been encouraged in this country. What you may well find is what happens when an entity doesn't regulate itself, and we've seen this relatively recently. There's been an inquiry into football, and the government want to have a more hands-on view. The reason that's happened is the FA are powerless. we're weird in this country. Our football association doesn't really have any power. They run grassroots football, they run referees, and they run the national team. And because there's no really regulatory body now, the government are putting one in place. And it's because the clubs run themselves. The Premier League basically run themselves. And you may well find that the government implements something, which it's spoken about the golden share before, haven't they? Which is putting clubs in the hands of the fans. And make no mistake about it, if they may well look at this and look back retrospectively and think, actually, we don't want this mess in future. So actually, we're going to make sure that people like Abramovich, or people that have any sort of whiff of controversy about them, aren't allowed to own football clubs. So, yeah, I mean, look, I think Chelsea fans have enjoyed the ride. I think if I was a Newcastle fan, I'd probably be looking at this quite closely, whilst they've got nothing to do with Putin or anything like that, is I'd be looking at what rules might be brought in the future and think, well, that may not be allowed to be the fruitful investment that they hope it might be. We don't know. I mean, even our own West Ham. I don't know anything about Kretinsky at all. I just sort of read the things that he's got Russian investments and think, oh my word, I hope that we're not bitten on the arse by this. I suspect we're not. Otherwise, he would have been. I think he would have had his collar felt by now anyway. So there you go. But it's a massive fallout for all of football. It does impact West Ham. Declan Rice going to Chelsea. I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure anymore. Tell you what though, wouldn't rule out his best mate Mason Mount coming to West Ham.